Welcome to the 10-Minute Life Lesson Podcast. My name is Jay Cleveland Payne. I train people for improved personal and professional development, offering my assistance to those ready to develop their goals into tangible, focused, and achievable plans of action. And this podcast is one of the tools I use to accomplish my mission. Generally, when the timer hits 9 minutes and 59 seconds on this recording, you'll have a fully developed life lesson that you can take with you and begin to implement immediately. And if this week's lesson has a ring of familiar, then it's probably a reinforcement of a life change you've already started to implement. This podcast falls under the umbrella of my greater personal development efforts, all under the Your Better You brand. For more information on accountability coaching or to gain access to tools, tricks, and life hacks, visit yourbetteryou.info. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. Now, here is this week's life lesson. I heard a woman speak the other day about her path to being a math genius, or more specifically, to being an astrophysicist, which means knowing a lot of math. The problem was, at the very beginning of her schooling, she didn't think she was going to be able to hack it. She didn't know that she wanted to be an astrophysicist, but she did not think she was very good at math. And this was in the second grade. So in the second grade, she had this idea that she wouldn't be able to do any harder math because the second grade math was too hard for her to handle. So how would she be able to handle math in the third grade, in the fourth grade, in high school, and in college? It turns out she was beginning a long lessons on point of reference. That took a while to come to full circle, but when it did, it became a very simple lesson that was very simple to explain and tell. Because by the time she reached high school and got to calculus, it became apparent that calculus was not harder than second grade math. To a second grader, it was pretty impossible to do calculus, of course, but it wasn't harder to do than it was as a high schooler doing calculus. Second grade math way back when was not less difficult. What it was less advanced, was less technical, and needed less of the background as you needed from second grade math and beyond to do. So looking backwards, what she knew she couldn't realize at that age was second grade math was hard to her as a second grader. But as a third grader, second grade math was a whole lot easier, although third grade math might have been difficult. So forth with fourth grade math and fifth grade math and on through middle school. So by the time she got to calculus, all the math she had conquered before built her up to a new challenge. She needed all that knowledge and all that study to do the hard stuff that was now calculus, that eventually she would overcome because it wasn't as hard as she thought it was. It just was more advanced and took a little more effort and a lot more maturity in learning, which she had all the background she needed starting in the second grade. Like I said, a lessons on point of reference that's much simpler than anything else I've heard in a long time. What you do hear a lot in my business, personal development, people talk about comparing yourself to someone else at a certain stage, you at the beginning to their end, what you have going on in the backstage, your preparation to their front stage performance. You can't compare the two because they're not comparable. The frame of reference is different. They've had a head start. They've had more success. They've also had probably many more failures and maybe had to build themselves up a few times before, as opposed to you doing on the beginning of your journey. If you look at that from that end, then there's no way you can ever come to any sort of comparison to where they are. The problem is you can once you get there, and the frustration comes from getting to that point. What you want to do is take calculus in the second grade before you've mastered second grade math, because you know you need calculus to do that thing or whatever reference you want it to be. You need that advanced study so you can get to the next level, that greater level, but you're not there yet. And you're not even close, and that's not really a problem, except in your head, you feel like you're too far behind. You feel like you're too far back. You don't have very much of a chance. You need a miracle, and in order to get that miracle, you need to get to that next step, and that next step is way too far than you believe. The next step is passing second grade math because you're a second grader, not passing calculus because you're a second grader. Now, I'm not a person who believes the journey is the fun part of the travel, but the journey is a part of the travel. I personally like to get to the destination and get the job done and go back home. But the way there, getting to the point of contact is something that's a very important part of the process. You can't magically appear. We haven't figured out how to do teleportation yet, at least not that I've seen. So when that happens, a whole lot of my life will be much, much easier. But the travel to and the travel from are big issues in your journey to where you're going and getting back to some sense of normal. Your travel to your big point, your big break, your next step takes a lot of effort and lots of steps in between. You have to get into your metaphorical car, take a metaphorical plane, make these metaphorical stops at these rest stations, map out, charting things out to get to this place. And then you have to actually move in that space to hit those landmarks, hit those marks, hit those ground points, hit the places that are designated on the way as waypoints to where you're trying to go. You're not going to get around it. That's the big problem. You can't skip the steps to success. You can't skip the steps to six-pack abs. You can't skip the steps to making $1 million in your side hustle. And you can't skip the steps to becoming an astrophysicist. You have to take high school calculus. You have to take a lot more calculus on the way, but you got to get to high school calculus. And before you can get past that, you've got to pass second grade math. And second grade math as a second grader may be hard, but you have to pass that to get to the third grade. And you have to pass that to get to the fourth grade, and so on and so on. The steps that must be done are the steps that must be done. The frame of reference has to be fixed in your mindset that makes you believe that you are already ready to take the main stage and headline the big show, when in reality, you're a novice, you're a beginner, and you're not very good right now, as you should not be very good right now. There is plenty of room for improvement, and who knows what may happen to help you skip or jump a few things along the way. But there's some basic things that must be done, basic languages you must learn so you can speak the language that the other people are speaking, basic mannerisms and basic learning lessons so that you don't go in as a false prophet, if you will. No one will fault you for being at the level that you're at. And no one will fault you for wanting to aspire to a greater level than you already are. But you'll get plenty of fault when you try to play off the efforts that you are more than you think you are. Yes, there is some tendency to the fake it till you make it persona, but there's only so much fake it you can do until you have to provide something. You can provide whatever you can at that fake it level. But at some point, the people who really matter, people who are the actual gatekeepers to where you're going, and there are still plenty of gatekeepers out there for various good reasons, will know what the real deal is. This person who did the speaking could not become an astrophysicist just by showing up and saying, I know calculus. It took a whole lot more to get there. And yes, there are plenty of gatekeepers, including colleges and job performances and various internships and actually showing what you know to become an astrophysicist. You can be an amateur one if you'd like to. You can just kind of figure out what needs to be done and kind of learn some things on your own. But nobody's going to ask you to plot courses for NASA if you don't have the actual background and ability to get it done. And unfortunately, that means in the second grade, you had to take second grade math. It's amazing how many people want to advance their projects, advance their learning, advance their thoughts past something well past their capacity when they just don't want to do the effort on the lower levels. They think that they're doing the world a favor by stepping ahead and getting to some place where they need to be because the world needs them there. The world does need more people there. The world needs more people where you want to go, but it needs those people to be ready when they get there. So don't sweat the small stuff when it's small stuff. Second grade math doesn't mean much to a high schooler doing calculus, doesn't mean much to a astrophysicist, but it does mean a whole lot to that second grader who's not quite sure where they're going at the end of the road. So focus on what's in front of you. If you're dealing with second grade, third grade, fourth grade math, that's where you are. Master it. Get good at it. Get good enough to teach it to someone as you move ahead forward. You will eventually get to calculus. You'll eventually get to astrophysicists. You'll eventually get to success, whatever it is, after you deal with the fact that you have to deal with the bottom levels of learning because they are the basic levels of learning. Again, thank you for being with us here on this podcast. Much, much lighter than last week's podcast, I know, and much more on topic and more theme of an actual personal lesson to learn, personal development and professional development lesson to learn. And I'm glad for that. Last week was just what it was. This week we're a bit more focused on getting back to the basics. A lot of things going on behind the scenes in my backstage, if you will, that's getting things back into focus that hopefully will give you more consistent, more good stuff, and probably less of the things we had last week when we're talking about domestic violence, essentially. But sometimes those messages need to be heard. That was a week where it needed to be heard, and it came out there. And I appreciate all the feedback I got between here and there doing this episode here. But I also appreciate those who want things that are a bit more on the consistent side, and that's what we're going to do our best to provide. And that's what we do. That's why you guys continue to stick around with this podcast, because it is what it is, and the folks that help keep me grounded and lined up with what's going on are going to do their best to keep me grounded and lined up to what's going on, because it is what it is. You want more input on this one right here? Don't forget, we have 2 personal development podcasts right now based off of yourbetteryou.info. This one, a 10-minute life lesson, and in 10 minutes, you've got your life lesson. There you go. Also, Steps Your Better You, which is 90 seconds, even quicker for a very quick burst of information. Those people love those as well. You can listen to a couple of those at a time and get a lot of great knowledge out of those podcasts. You can find them both at yourbetteryou.info. And you can subscribe to them at wherever your pods are caught. Apple iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spreaker, which is the actual media host we use for this, and various other places, including iHeartRadio. A lot of people, we get a lot of listens from iHeartRadio, and we're starting to grow on Spotify as well. So as a newer platform where the bigger boys, essentially, it's a place where you can listen to your music and stay in the same app to listen to the Joe Rogans and those guys. We're getting a lot of love. People are finding us on Spotify. We thank you so much for that as well. Basically, let us know where you're finding us so we can do more talk about that and promotion on those levels. Let us know what we can do for the podcast itself by going to yourbetteryouinfo@gmail.com. That's an email address, and email us what we can do to fix whatever's on whatevers, including the articles we have. We post 2 podcasts and an article every week at the website, so check it out and let me know what you think about that. Also, you can email me directly at jclevelandpayne@gmail.com, and check out my main website. Sometimes I can speak, sometimes I can't. jclevelandpayne.net. Check that one out as well and see what other projects are going on. We are revamping a lot of issues, including one more plug for morebettermedia.com, where we're basically scrapping the front end, if you will, and trying to rebuild the website from scratch. And by we, I mean me, which is probably the wrong thing. So we're trying to put all these podcasts, all these audios, and all these media things that we're creating into one big thing as a new side project to help manage a lot of things, be easier to find things, if you will. So check it out in its very, very, very state of flux right now, and keep checking in as we get it close to better. Thank you for that. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening to this thing. Make sure you're actually subscribed to it so you're not having to search for it on your own or scramble around and see what happens. It comes immediately into your podcatcher or into your RSS feed, however you like to get it, every single week with a great lesson. Like I said, 9 minutes and it's done. Just that simple. Call it 10 minutes because I talked too much in the intro. But that's what I have for this week. Next week, we will do it all again with something a lot more life lesson-ish and less, well, you know. I think you'll enjoy it. If you don't, you can always let me know. But this is what we do for you at the 10-Minute Life Lesson Podcast from yourbetteryou.info.